Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Stefanik, nice to see you again. Thanks for taking the time. Speaking of every country having a vote, we had a pretty constructive conversation about the Pacific Island nations with which we've, I think, made some progress in terms of engagement, but it's kind of a mixed bag because of the PRC influence. And I'd just like to hear you say in public what we discussed in private, which is that it is important that we remain engaged in all these little nations, which are sovereigns and all do have a vote at the UN for strategic purposes. When we talk about the Asia-Pacific region, we tend to talk about South Asia, East Asia, very little about the countries that occupy the Pacific Ocean, and I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. And considering the importance of the region, all regions are important, but the threat of a rising China in the region, it's increasingly critical that the U.S. continue to strengthen our partnerships, our diplomatic outreach to all countries, big and small, within Indo-PACOM, and it is a commitment to do so within the Pacific Islands that you and I discussed. And it's deeply tied to your state's national security.
Sure is.
As you know.
You know, there are kind of two theories of the case around how to use the UN to counter PRC influence. And I think you and I are on the same page as it relates to what to do next. My own judgment, and then you can tell me if you agree with this, is that to the degree and extent that we want to engage in muscular diplomacy, muscular foreign policy, muscular defense policy, it is not actually in our interests to recede away from all these UN bodies. And obviously Senator Lee and I probably disagree about the UN itself and some of the policies that it's made. But I think that we would be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we just go away from these international convenings. And so, because China is not going away, they are trying to run the meetings. And to the extent that we withdraw, I know WHO is a done deal. I know Paris is a done deal. Fair enough. Elections and consequences and all of that. But I am worried that we're going to just get out of the room and then relegate ourselves to observer status and then wonder why we're losing the battle in the room. And I just want to know if you are committed to staying in those rooms, to fighting for American priorities and values, rather than sort of taking your marbles and going home.
I think it's very important that we stay in those rooms, particularly the technical organizations like telecommunications, intellectual property, civil aviation. There was a discussion earlier about artificial intelligence. We need to lead with our standards and our values, and frankly, the world is looking for us to lead, and that's an important tool in our national security toolkit. And I look forward to working with Secretary Rubio and his strong record of being a strong voice in the U.S. Senate now that he's confirmed as Secretary of State. So certainly there will be policy disagreements. I support the president's decision, but we need to push back in the short term and long term against the CCP's inroads, and we need to do so with people as well, both at the lowest level, the starting entry levels within the UN system, but also the senior level and heads of these sub-UN agencies.
Thank you for that. I know Senator Coons may have covered this a little bit. I understand there's a 90-day pause on all aid. And again, elections and consequences, like every president comes in and pauses all pending regulations and all the rest of it. But some of this is going to have material consequences like pretty quickly, and we don't have 90 days when it comes to our military partnerships. People don't have 90 days when it comes to humanitarian assistance. And I'm just wondering how we navigate through the absolute prerogative that a president has to set their own policy course versus 90 days could be too long for some communities and countries.
Thank you for the question. I support the president's executive action. I think it's important that we be strong voices for the American taxpayer and ensure that all of our investments go to specific results, strengthening our national security, making America strong, safe, and prosperous, and bringing peace through strength. If confirmed, I will work within the National Security Council and with the President and Secretary of State to ensure that we have the strong tools that we need within the United Nations to work with Secretary Rubio on our broader national security strategy that the President has laid out for the American people.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, can we agree that 90 days may be too long, and that if confirmed, you're going to try to figure out where to turn the spigot back on? Because right now, this is a blanket freeze, and I presume some of the things that are frozen are going to get unfrozen. It'd be better if we could unfreeze some of these things in 20 days rather than 90, because there are real geopolitical consequences to freezing all aid for 3 months.
Thank you, Senator Schatz. I do support the President's executive order. We will work on the National Security Council to make sure that all the tools that are needed to protect our national security, and the diplomatic piece is an important part of that when it comes to the UN. I have confidence that the President's going to make sure that we have the tools we need to protect our national security.
I liked your answer to the previous question better, but thank you very much.